Okay, well, a friend of mine is quite into crossbows, so I went looking around on the internet, and there's a set of plans from Popular Mechanics that were actually printed in June 1944. So this goes along with my whole theme sort of in my life about World War II stuff. So this is instructions from 1944 on how to build your own crossbow. Now it provides you with two versions that you can make. One's a low power version using a wooden bow and various plastic components, and the other one is using a heavy piece of spring steel. The spring steel version is slightly more compact, but doesn't necessarily have to be more compact, does it? You can make it to any sort of scale you want. And the spring steel version is using car leaf springs, which are still available at the moment. You know, you can still pick them up. Some of these small like Rascal vans and Suzuki carry vans, which you might still see in scrapyards, they potentially are donor vehicles. There's also some other things like hijet vans and things like that, possibly some small cars. Other thing could be trailer springs, leaf springs made for trailers. Now my printer's started acting up, so it's actually 6 pages, but I've only got 2 and about 3/4 of a page, and my Epson printer has started coming up with errors saying my cartridges aren't compatible. So I'm following some instructions on that, and I'm leaving it off for an hour. Hopefully I'll be able to print the rest off at some point. Now I went on eBay and I managed to find, some people are going to moan at me for doing this, vintage parts. You can't do things like that with all those lovely vintage parts. But my excuse is that I think there are a number of companies still producing these springs brand new for these vintage cars. So, and some of them I've seen on the internet are not that expensive, so I'm going to say to hell with it. They were the right price. They are also slightly corroded and so on, and they're asking for being used for another purpose, in my opinion, and they were cheap. I could go and pick them up from the dealer about an hour away, or from the person selling them from an hour away, and they cost me 29 quid for 2 complete spring sets. Now these are Hillman Minx springs, and they are Series 5 Hillman Minx. It's got what it's got written on them. Now these should come apart quite easily. As I say, there's quite a bit of pitting on them in places. Hopefully that won't be an issue, and potentially could give my crossbow a bit of a vintage look to it. You could try and get some springs a little bit bigger than these, but it says in the instructions to use leaf springs from a small car, and well, the small family car and the Minx was. Now, these springs are about 1.5 inch wide, and the idea is that you get a hacksaw or an angle grinder, as we would these days. People generally didn't have angle grinders back in 1944, so you draw a line on them and you taper them. Now, I agree with this tapering business, because some people don't taper the spring sets, they leave them the full width, and if you leave it the full width, that's going to put, you would say, oh, it's going to put even pressure all along it. The problem is, right in the centre of a car leaf spring you have a hole, and that point there is right where the stock of the Crossbow is going to be. So that will be a point exerting pressure right at that point there. And if you have got the same sort of pull exerted right across this whole spring, the point where it's going to be likely to crack will be right across where that hole is, where the stock is mounted, because you're basically flexing it a lot more at that point than you are across the rest of the Crossbow. So in my opinion, you want to even this out a little bit, or if anything, make that the strongest point there and make it slightly weaker as it comes out to the edges. Then you're not as likely to cause your bow to split at that point there. Hopefully that makes some sense. Now, there's a number of bowstrings that you can get on eBay, and a lot of them are about 26 inches in length. So 26 inches. So when I look at the spec on these plans here, it suggests, I don't know if I've got the page here, I probably haven't. No, it suggests that you want to go for a deflection of about, yeah, I'm sure it said about 3.5 inches, but I might have to check up on this. Yeah, that'll be it. So basically you have a deflection of, say, you say about 2 inches. That means at, say, about 26 inches in length. Well, no, hang on, I'm going to flip this this spring over again so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm looking at the third spring up on this lot. You see the spring that just finishes there, from there across to there, sorry, no, across to there, there to there. Now that spring on the Minx is 28 inches. 28 inches across on there. Now, at a bit of a guess, I reckon by the time I flex that back, mount a Crossbow stock in the centre and flex this back enough to get a 26 inch string on it, that's going to give me quite a bit of deflection. Now, what we're talking about on deflection is, if I, let's see, if I lie that from the ends of the spring there across like that, the deflection is what's in the centre distance there, the centre distance there to the edge of that piece of steel, which is about 1 3/4 inch. So it's the back of the third spring there to the front edge of that piece of steel. So it's 1 3/4 inches. Now, if I can put enough flex in this thing to bend it back so that I can get a 26-inch bowstring across it, now I'd be quite happy. But I don't want to put too much tension on this thing. If I put too much tension, then I'm not going to be able to pull the drawstring back, even with some sort of mechanical advantage like a windlass or some sort of leverage system. So it could be that I need to shorten these springs a little bit. See, I've got plenty of spring here, so there's no issue. If I want to, if I cock it up with the first one, I've got another 4 springs after this, which is why I chose this Hillman Minx spring set, because there's a lot of surplus springs in it. I'm just looking at that one. That one appears to have a little crack in the side of the spring just there. Could be wrong, but it looks like it's cracking, running along the edge there. So that one is probably slightly damaged, but that's not an issue. So I've got 5 springs in each spring set, and of course, so I've got 10 springs in total. Not bad for £29 for 10 potential, for enough spring steel to make 10 potential crossbows. Yeah. So, what can I do next? Basically, if I take a measurement on that spring, which is 28 inches, measuring it round on the curve, then I put a flex in this and bend it so that a 26-inch spring will reach between the 2 points. I'll know what sort of shape it's taking up and how much I'm going to be pulling it and so on. Anyway, this is a bit of an experiment at the moment. What I'm going to have to do is grind off, let's see, I'm going to use that third spring there, so I'm going to grind off that shackle around the springs there and dump that. I'll put a grinder through the bolt in the centre. Then I'm going to take the nut out, the nut and bolt out in the centre there, and release a few of these springs. Okay, I've cut this spring down. It's at the full length that it was on the Hillman Minx spring set. I think it's about 29 inches. Can't remember what I said it was. I'm not going to try measuring this with one hand. Somewhere I've got a steel rule kicking around. I think I've left it in the house though. I'm not sure. Anyway, cut that down. Looking fairly okay. Used an angle grinder with these little stainless steel cutting discs. They soon got worn down, but they did cut the steel down quite easily. Now, if I take this along over here, the next thing I'm looking for is some wood to make a stock. Now this here is a bit of timber that came out of my house from a job that I'd done at some point. It was actually a lintel which has been removed, and it used to have a staircase underneath this at one time, going back quite a while ago. Now this timber, it is hardwood, it's not pine. I don't know what sort of wood it is. Maybe it's oak, white oak or something, or I'm not ash, maybe, don't know. The exact age of it, got a bit of weight to this thing, is unknown. It could be 300 years old, plus the age of the tree, because the house is about 300 years old. Now this paint on the bottom, this is probably a modern paint which was last applied, but on the top of this it's had some bricks sat on the top surface, and the back was all hidden away, probably inside a ceiling. Now when this was removed, I had to saw through it here, and I also had to saw through the handmade nails which are here. You can see the square nails. Now these are the old blacksmith nails, which were in use in this sort of stuff hundreds of years ago. So I don't know what the wood's made out of. It could date back to 1600s, 1700s, it may be 1800s, unknown. If you want to see some wood which is probably older, this is some wood off the side of HMS Victory. A friend of mine passed it on to me. He's quite good at talking people into giving him stuff, and he passed this on to me. So this is the paint which you see on the side of HMS Victory, you know, the yellowy paint, sort of yellowy brown, the classic HMS Victory look. Now you can see all this is worm eaten, woodworm, making a terrible mess of it, and this is why it had to be cut off HMS Victory, because it's eating it to bits. Anyway, that's also going to be oak. In fact, I can tell that's oak. Even now it's so old, I can't dig my nail into the side of it. It's still a solid piece of wood, even though it's riddled with wormholes. Anyway, I'm going to leave that down there. At some point I'm going to treat that and put it in a display case to say what it is. Piece of HMS Victory. So this timber here, what I'm planning on doing is trying to get these nails out of here. So ideas that I have, I've used similar sort of principles in the past, is that I get things like a steel washer. I stick that over the nail like so, and then I get my MIG welder and I weld the washer to the nail. Then I try and pry the washer and nail up and out the wood. Then I do the same with the smaller one at the side there. I'll try and get them out. When I say smaller one, it's probably originally the same size nail as that, but it hasn't gone in as far. So these nails taper, not like modern nails, which are mostly the same diameter all the way along and round, and then just come to a point at the end. These things taper, so because they taper, there's a chance that they'll come out easier. So that's going to be my test, is to see if I can weld the center of that onto a washer, then pry it out. If you're ever doing something similar to this, for instance, you get a bolt stuck in a vehicle, and the bolt head shears off, you can do a similar sort of thing. Basically, you would say this is a bolt here, which it is, and that's sheared off. Get a nut, place it over the tip, maybe use your actual clip of your MIG welder to hold it in place, then weld the center of the nut to the remaining broken off shaft in the body. And when you weld it, the actual heat transfers through the bolt into the body of the vehicle, causes the bolt to expand and then contract, thereby potentially creating a system to loosen the bolt off inside the metal. Then once it's after a minute, when it's cooled down or so, then maybe put some spray lubricant on, and then get your spanner on and see if it'll shift. Quite often you'll find that's worked, and you can then get your snapped off bolt out. So I'm going to try this principle, which I've come up with on this, and again, by creating heat in the metal, it should expand slightly, then contract, and hopefully that expansion and contraction will aid the nail to come out of the wood. As to why I couldn't get that nail out at the time, I'm not saying. It could be that it was hidden in an area that I couldn't get out, so I had to get a hacksaw in and saw it flush to the wood. Yeah, so I'll give that a try. Okay, so I've just welded the washer onto the top of the nail, and I've just used this little pry bar and I've hammered it under a little bit. The actual heat of welding the nut on has burned, started to burn the actual metal, burn the actual wood. Now you can see this is now slipping out really easy. You can see how much heat welding this has applied, and it's burnt the surface of the wood. But the important thing is, it has got it out. You can see how much heat went through the welder. I had the welder on quite a high setting, so I wanted to make sure that it really welded onto that nail. So you can see the sort of nail we were looking at. The nail, when it's driven in, has gone in quite bent. You can see how it's been hammered, that nail, by a blacksmith a couple of 100 years ago. Now I've got to try and do that to the other. Now don't worry too much about the surface of the wood. It's thick enough. You can see that I'm going to be cutting a lot of the surface of this and planing a lot of it back, so it doesn't matter too much. And the deeper I go in there, the smaller, the less the damage will have been caused to the timber. It's done the next one, and God knows whether this is going to be as successful. I bet it isn't, but you never know, it might be. Could be that I need to use a screwdriver on this. It got so hot that the wood burns, and that's probably what you want, actually. So I should probably be using the screwdriver on this. I'm going to you see how I did this? I put the washer in some mole grips and then attached the earth to the mole grips. I could probably use mole grips to pull that out at this point, or some pliers, you know. Put my knees against that. Come on. I knew I was being a bit over optimistic on this, but you can see the nail has come up quite a bit now. Now I think I can get that out with a pair of mole grips on it, or you know, these pliers for pulling nails out. So there you go, 2 nails out. That's not too bad. Didn't take too long to do. You can see the heat transferred along the nail from the weld and warmed it up right through the timber, burnt around the surface of the nail, so it came out quite easy. Next thing I've got to do is work out the pattern that I want in this, but I think what I'll do first is I'll inspect it and make sure there's absolutely no more nails in this. Then I might take a plane to the surface and take off some of the worst sort of parts of the timber and have a good inspection of it and work out exactly what sort of stock shape I want. I want to go for not like whatchamacallit, medieval crossbow. I want to go for something a little bit later in design, where they were going from let's see, flintlock muskets, flintlock rifles, namely like the blunderbuss. Like the blunderbuss, obviously they started to go to a full stock because of the recoil of a blunderbuss, which would mean that you had to have a proper stock into your shoulder to take the recoil. Now when you were using crossbows, the crossbow stocks were quite narrow and actually came back to a small point. And now if you had recoil on that device with a small point, it's like 1 or 2 inches in diameter, it would severely harm your you know, your shoulder if it jumped back. So crossbows generally, as far as I know, don't recoil, unlike a firearm. So but I think what they later started to do was incorporate designs from firearms into the design of a crossbow. I think probably people liked the design of the firearm stock, in that it was a nice piece of timber to hold against your shoulder, and you could rest your cheek down onto the side of the stock and look down the sights. So yeah, I suspect that'll be the design I'll go for. I'll have a bit of a curve in the stock and fit some brass in for a butt plate, and maybe have some brass release plates on the side, and maybe brass in a few other places. I'm not sure yet. Right, see how I get on. Okay, I happen to have here a little model of the HMS Victory on my fireplace. So this is the yellow timbers that I was talking about on that piece of wood I got. Now down here is a flintlock blunderbuss. Now I might have had this in the video before, don't know. It's marked up as HMS Ajax. Now if I flip this over, say this would date from I think 1700s, can't remember the battle, what was it, with the HMS Ajax and the Victory in it, but anyway, if I stick this stock of the blunderbuss on top of my timber, draw around it, I approximately get the shape which I want. Now when you as I've said in other stock making videos I've done, when you cut out a stock, you want to try and get the grain to run through the hand grip part of the stock. So what I said before was inaccurate. You don't want to just stick the stock like that across your wood. One reason for doing that is it means you need a wider piece of wood, you know, to get all the stock shape in. Also, you want the grain to run, at least in the centre area, you want it to run from the back of your butt here straight through in a line to like 3/4 of the way across, like under where the barrel is going to be sitting. You know, you want to get as much grain as you can of the timber running right through the hand grip, because that's the point where it narrows in. So you want to get the strength. Now, as I said, the release mechanism, or lock mechanism as I would call it on a flintlock, is going to be hiding these two nail holes in the timber here. Now the butt, by the time I take the wood down on this, you can see how thick this timber is. There's my hand. Yeah. By the time I take that in, hopefully a lot of the damage from those burnt nail holes is going to be gone. Now, the other thing I've noticed on this, when I started planing it, is it has woodworm. It wasn't so visible on the surface, but once you start planing in to the timber, you start seeing little worm tracks. So you plane the surface off, and the woodworm have been skating along just underneath the paint and underneath the whitewashed surface, because woodworm don't like to eat whitewash because it's lime based paint. So underneath the several coats of paint which were on the underside here is old-fashioned lime wash, made out of shells and so on that have been battered up. So very caustic, so that's why they painted it on so much stuff, kept the fungus and creepy crawlies and woodworm at bay. Anyway, so that's the shape. I think it works out about 29 inches. If I stick this steel rule on, stick it from about there to there, it's actually about 29 and a half, nearly 30. So that's working out quite good. Now I measured the bow as well, and that's 28 and a half inches. Sticking the steel rule on it, 28 and a half. And the shape's worked out quite nicely. So I'm going to start sawing this big piece of timber up and see how I get on. Now I'm just trimming it down to 2 inches in width, so I'm sawing the two sides off it. Taking a while. Right, as you can see, I've put a good few hours into this, and it's taking shape relatively well. Anyway, this is about, I think it's about 29 inches long up to now, this stock. Now, looking at specs that came out from Popular Mechanics on draw pulls and things for the steel one, it's quite a lot smaller than the wood and wooden bow version. So let's see, length of stock 28 and a half inches on the steel bow version and 37 and a half inches on the wood bow version. Now I'm making my steel bow, which is here, slightly larger than the one that they've got. They've got theirs at 23 inch. Yes, 23 inch steel bow, whereas mine is about 28 and a half, I think it was. So making my stock slightly larger than that one is neither here nor there, really, is it? Yeah, so I've put a bit of a curve to the bottom of the stock, and I'll either put a steel plate or a brass one. Brass would be nice if I can find some brass plate. I'm hoping I might have some brass plate kicking around, which I can cut and fit. I'm tempted to start working on the release components and the side plates. The side plates I think are going to be in steel, and I'll blue them, and I might stamp them up, put some writing on them, stuff like that, I don't know. Try and make them a little bit ornate as well, really. Be fitting the era that I'm going for. You know, you can see they tended to try and make side locks look quite pretty. This is a tower one with the stamps on and everything. Well, I've decided that the grip section is just too thick on this. So I've had a good stare at this for a while, and I've decided to, after looking at the graining in the wood and so on, and looking at the pathway that the grain runs through it, and so on, I've decided to thin it out by cutting a curve underneath. So this is the underside of the stock, so the trigger will come through round about here somewhere, and I'm thinning the stock out so that I can get my hand round a lot easier. And what I'm thinking about doing is fitting the release or lock plate in this area here, trying to make it in a nice shape, and then I'm going to curve the actual wood of the stock in its length round over the sides here. I'm going to curve it round here, round all this section off, and I might put 2 grooves in the side for your hand to fit into, for your fingers to fit into. But that tends to be more of a modern thing people do on modern firearms, air rifles and so on, to give that grip position. Now I don't know whether that's going to be a bit of a telltale thing that it's very modern manufactured.